Um, Hi, listener. This is From Ideology to Unity, a spiritual journey where we let go of ego and ideological doctrine in favor of meaning, purpose, and unity as a whole. Today, I'm interviewing Will Caminada, a podcaster, singer, and songwriter who shares helpful spiritual guidance and conducts fascinating interviews on his podcast. Hi,
Hi, Nicholas. Thank you for having me.
it's a pleasure. So, if you could sum up what you do and what it's about, how do you describe it?
I am a spiritual guide. Um, I would sum it up as a teacher and artist because I'm also an artist. I'm a singer-songwriter, and I guess that's actually what led me to where I am today. You know, my passion for art and in the pursuit of that dream, I found my soul, and I just went deeper into my spirituality and into my healing journey. And so today I kind of just mix it all up. I embrace my multi potentiality and multi
Hmm.
dimensionality, which I think we all are multi potential and multi dimensional beings. And so, yeah, in a nutshell, today I am a teacher and an artist, and I just want to help people and give them some kind of support in their spiritual awakening journey, in their healing journey, and just I think ultimately help raise the consciousness of the planet.
Cool. Yeah, it's a worthy goal, although all goals are ultimately worthy. So, how did it start? How did you find your soul?
Yeah, I think I always say that the spiritual awakening is a journey more than like one moment that you awakened and you realized, there's more to life than this physical body and then material things. And we all have very unique pathways and unique journeys. For me personally, in my journey, I've always been very inclined to spirituality ever since I was young, ever since I was a child. I was a very sensitive child. And I would say that what the catalyst for my spiritual awakening was actually when my dad passed away. So he made the transition from this physical form into the spiritual one. And I was only 8. And so obviously that was a trauma in my childhood, but I remember just asking those really deep questions like what happens after someone dies? Where is my dad? Like, can he hear me? Can we communicate? And just really keep asking those questions that were maybe very deep for an 8-year-old kid. But I
Yeah.
guess that's what really opened me up to start to have some kind of relationship and communication with my dad. So he would show up in my dreams, and we would have some kind of communication, and that made me believe that he was still with me. And so obviously at the time I didn't have any idea of what spiritual awakening or healing journey or consciousness was, and I didn't have anybody in my family to perhaps give me some kind of support in that sense. But I also think that this is one of the main characteristics of the spiritual awakening journey. I think, first of all, um, you start questioning things. It can be those deep questions, as in, like, why am I here? What's my purpose in this life? Or it can even be just questions about, do I want to be here where I'm living? Do I want to be in this job? Do I want to be in this relationship? And I think this is like one of the first signs that you're awakening. And the other thing too is finding the answers within. Really, you can, and I think that's one of the main differences between religion and spirituality. I grew up Catholic, and so I have a religious background, but I think, like, essentially for me the main difference is that in spirituality you are on your path and you find your path, and eventually you find the answers within. You might experiment and try different things, but ultimately you find that inner guidance.
Yeah, that makes sense to me as well. Um, you don't need to follow all these rules and rituals to access the divine because it's within you. And when we realize, well, it's not a sudden realization, like you said, it's asking the questions and
Yeah.
reflecting then.
Yeah, asking the questions and also like having the willingness and perhaps even the courage to find them, because if you're just asking the questions but you're not actually taking any action towards finding the answers within, then you're just going to remain asking questions for the rest of your lives. And actually, I think that the questions will keep coming, right? So that's a sign that we are evolving and that we are growing. But yeah, I would say that, when you're more in that religion side, you're sort of given the answers. You're sort of given, a book and a history that says this is how it's supposed to be. Um, Whereas when you're in that spiritual path, you may try different, may even explore different religions. You may even explore different healing modalities, read different books, listen to podcasts and watch videos, and then see how it resonates with you. And so more and more you develop that resonance within, so that you listen to something or you read something, but how that resonates within, it's really up to the individual.
Right. So did you start with your art before you discovered spirituality? Or was it the other way around?
Yes, I could say that, yes, I started with art. And for me, my art was always um, a way to find um, a way to express myself, to express my emotions. And it was kind of like a saving grace. It was my go-to place where I felt safe to express my emotions and even explore that inner world. Um, but I really think that they are very connected.
Hmm.
And it doesn't even have to be like art as we know it. If people, maybe they like writing, and if they're journaling every day, that's a kind of art, and that's a way to express how they feel in a safe way. And so for me, it was always like I said, like a place to go to, to sing, to write. When I was little, I would write little poems, to express how I was feeling. So even though I wasn't very open about how I was feeling with my mom or my family, I had that one place, those words, those sounds. And more recently, so I started writing my songs, and actually like developing an artist project. And that's when I moved to England. That was about maybe 8 years ago. That was the second time. I was doing a bachelor in songwriting, so writing songs every day pretty much. And that for me sort of became my spiritual practice. I started to be really consistent, first of all, with meditation, and just the writing songs, free writing, journaling, and really understanding like what I want to say with my songs. And that was the way that I developed more that spiritual side of me. And so today I know that they are connected, they're not separate.
Is your songwriting at all channeling?
Yes. And I found out that when I was writing. So I actually think that any kind of writing is channeling, whether we call it channeling or not. even if you just sit for a few minutes and start journaling, like what you're feeling, or maybe you have a prompt, a question that you start writing, that is a way to practice channeling. That is a way to practice connecting with your spirit guides, or even with your inner guidance. And so because I was doing this very consistently on a regular basis, almost daily, I started noticing that sometimes I would write things and they would just come through me, especially after meditation. And so that's when I started putting the pieces together. So I was like, okay, I'm going to meditate first, and then I'm going to write my songs, or then I'm just going to write something. And I actually, many times I heard melodies during meditation, or I heard lyrics during meditation, and then I would write it down. And then that's when you put your mind into it, when you have to actually like edit and put it into a structure.
So that sounds like clairaudience or something like that.
Yeah, today I know that when I was doing it, I didn't really know much about it. So again, it was just that self-exploration. Um, I'm more clairaudient and clairvoyant. So I hear and I also visualize, but it's all inner. So there is a difference too, because you can hear from with your physical ears, and you can see with your physical eyes, which is not so common. Mostly people hear it inside their head, if you will, or they see it with their third eye. So that's, for me, that's what happens mostly.
Is it simply being able to imagine like sound playing in your head and like in your mind's ear hear it, or your mind's eyes see it? Is that simply it, or is there more to it than that?
Yeah, no, that's simply it.
Wait, so like I could literally, if I choose to right now, just like hear a tune in my head.
Yeah,
I didn't know. I thought that was normal. Maybe
yeah.
it is.
Yeah, and it's nice that you brought up the imagination factor, because especially when one is beginning to channel, or yeah, or they don't even know that they're doing it, imagination is a form of channeling. It's like we sometimes diminish the power of imagination, but when you're imagining, you're actually visualizing future timelines that you can jump into. You can actually feel those emotions as if they were real. And when we're talking about channeling, our spirit guides, they work through our imagination too. And for quite a while in the beginning, when I was doing that writing, meditating thing, I would question, I would doubt myself, because I would think, oh, I'm just making it up. But then I would get messages from my spirit guide saying, like, just believe it, because
Also,
your imagination is a spiritual thing.
do we really make anything up? I mean, there's the Akashic records, right? So technically everything, and we're all one, so it's all connected. So the idea that we make something up is based on separation, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, the idea that you make something up is that is what your ego wants you to think, because we have an ego that's through the 3D design. I don't believe we get rid of it, but we can be aware of it. And so when we think I'm making this up, that's actually a perception from the ego. Because when you look from a more spiritual perspective, or from a 5D perspective, like you said, the ego is not really doing anything. It's just, you're just opening up, let's say, the channels for these images and these ideas to come to you. And that's also what I believe inspiration is. We think that that's one of the things that I was very interested when I was studying. It's like, where does inspiration come? Like, we have this idea that we have to wait for the right moment to be inspired, for that idea to come to you. I believe that inspiration is available all the time. It's just really a matter of us to be open to receiving those images and those ideas.
And how do we do that?
I believe that there are many ways that one can do that. For me, what works and what worked and what works is meditation and having a spiritual practice, is connecting with that, with your soul or your spirit, connecting with that place in us that goes beyond the physical, goes beyond the ego, just really opening up yourself to accessing those, I could say, those higher dimensions of consciousness. If we're just in our ego mind, just operating in the 3D level of consciousness, we still get ideas. Don't get me wrong. We still get inspiration, but we think that this is us. We think that we're doing it, right? It comes from our mind. It comes from, or it came from a movie that I watched. But it's all a spiritual experience in my perspective.
Right. So would you say it's about being open and being aware, and the light from within shines forth easier when you do that?
Yes, absolutely.
And so the ego, you don't get rid of it, but perhaps awareness, openness, acceptance, these things, do they transform it in some way?
Um, I I believe that we just have more awareness of it. And so we are not identified with it. We are not identified with the ego or the thoughts or the feelings. And we actually work with it. So when we're talking about, creating inspiration, um, I could have, a feeling might come up that inspires me to write a sad song, for example. And I'm okay with feeling the emotion. I'm okay even having the thoughts around the situation that inspired me, that song or whatever. And I'm not saying, well, this is just the ego, trying to make me believe that, this is a bad situation or a sad situation. I'm actually accepting it and embracing it and working with it. And we go between, I believe, between the ego and the spirit. I think it's a dance. They are
Yeah.
both real in our system. And it's not about, if you want to get rid of it, the more you want to get rid of it, the more the louder it will be.
Right. So it's like a bit like loving your inner child in a way. And like if you don't love part of yourself or your ego, what have you, it'll be more of a fight, but it doesn't have to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you, like you said, when you love your inner child or whatever it is, then there is no separation. There is no judgment, because in my view, love is neutral. Love is the container that holds sacred space for all of that, for all of your emotions, for the ego, for the spirit, for the inner child, for everything. There's no judgment, there's only compassion. And so when you tap into that love inside of you, which I believe we are all essentially love and light. And so when you have that spiritual practice, when you have that awareness and you keep expanding that awareness, you are more and more in touch with the love within. And so you're able to love your ego, to love your inner child, to love all of your emotions, whether you're angry or happy or joyful or frustrated, you have that acceptance within.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. So your book is called From Darkness to Light.
That's right.
What's the symbolism behind that?
Yeah, it was It is like a compilation of all the work that I was doing when I was writing my EP, which has the same name. And so I've written more than 5 songs, but I chose 5 songs to go into the EP. And then I created meditations to each song with the theme, because each song has a theme. And so I created the book as a compilation to talk more about the story behind the songs and what I've learned from the experiences that I've gone through in my life. And then there's also an aspect of, you could say, self-help, because there's some journal prompts and the meditation and the music for people to reflect, people to practice meditation. So in essence, I believe that we are all in a journey towards light, or towards the light within. But really the darkness, like I was saying, is just a part of the journey, and they coexist. Like, I can't find the light if I don't have the darkness. And essentially, like, in this 3D experience that we're in, we will face darkness or duality or pain in order to understand the other side of that pain, the other side of the darkness, which is light. So the subtitle of it is actually a continuous journey towards your essence. And I think it's a continuous journey, because it's not like you find the light and then that's it. You're living in light and love all the time. It's really that idea that the darkness exists to push you into the pathway of light, and the pathway of light is you. When you shine your light, when you go through whatever darkness you've experienced in your life, you become that light, you become the pathway. So I know that sounds a little bit poetic and perhaps a little poetic, or like I'm talking about light and darkness, but what I'm really talking about is those painful moments, those difficult moments that we go through and we've gone through, that we will go through. We're not immune to feeling the pain. As much spiritual practice we do, as much awareness we have, we will go through some kind of pain, some difficult moments. But when you're able to go through it, awaken, heal, expand your consciousness a little more. I always talk about that Trinity, awaken, heal, expand your consciousness. This is a cycle. So that's why I call it a continuous journey. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. Like, I had this image in my mind while you're speaking about, like, suppose like you're journeying through a dark woods and you're not like following the way or the towel, right? You're off to the side, the sort of lost, say, but you keep getting, in all the dark things you encounter, you keep getting like hints about how to find the path if you're aware of them. And then when you do find the path, it may be weaving one way or the other, but that's the path up in frequency to infinity, right? But like, it may be amazing and bright and true to yourself once you're on the path, but it's not the end. It's just a new beginning, right?
Yes, absolutely. And when you were talking about it, I imagined what we go through every day, which is day and night, right?
Yeah.
If it was just day, then we would take the sun for granted, right? We need the night, we need the connection with the moon as well. So it's also, I guess, trying to transcend that idea of duality, which
Hmm.
we experience a lot here in the 3D level of consciousness. Um, and when I talk about darkness, I'm not necessarily saying this is a bad thing. And that's kind of the premise of the book. It's like the darkness is not the bad thing, but it's what pushes us into the pathway of light, and we become the pathway of light. It's not that there is a path of light. We become, the more you're able to go from darkness to light and keep going from darkness to light, the more you are shining your light within, and the more, the brighter the pathway becomes. And that's also an analogy for when you work on yourself, when you shine your light, you are helping raise the consciousness of the collective. Because like you said, I also believe that we are not separate, we are one. And so the healing that I do within, the more authentic I am, the more that I shine my light, the more that this ripple effect will continue to go on.
How do we keep faith when we face doubts?
How do we keep faith?
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I think that, from my journey, and the way I guide people, I try to help them, is first of all, understanding that our emotions are part of the human design, and the emotions are what keeps us moving. I'd say that emotion is energy in motion. And so without them, we would be zombies. There wouldn't be any growth. There wouldn't be any healing. And so obviously certain emotions we don't want to feel, and we feel very uncomfortable. They feel very painful. But when we practice that, when we have a consistent spiritual practice, we are able to accept our emotions more easily, and just feel them, because we know that whenever we feel them, we are healing, and we are just allowing that energy and motion to move through us. And we know that that emotion, whether we perceive them as good or bad, is actually pushing us to evolution. But to get to a place where you are okay feeling whatever emotions and you have that awareness, I believe that that one needs a consistent spiritual practice. And the way I see it is, when we're talking about the Trinity, mind, body, and spirit, that's our design, but they're not separate, but we need to focus, we need to pay attention and look after our mind the same way that we look after our physical bodies, the same way that we look after our spiritual health, if you will. So it's the same idea of you taking care of your body, eating the food that makes you feel good, exercising, and you might do that for a little bit. And then when you don't, we might be out of shape. So it's kind of the same thing. And what I always say is that we have a spiritual practice, and we practice it, whatever it is: meditation, breath work, journaling, sound healing. We practice it when we're feeling good, when all is well in our perception, so that when something happens, you have a strong foundation to go through. So when the storm comes, and emotional turmoil comes, you are able to feel it, but you feel safe in facing the feelings.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. How do we maintain a consistent spiritual practice without becoming egoically attached to that practice?
It's a very good question, because sometimes we can use the spiritual practice almost as a way to escape reality sometimes, or even thinking that it will be the cure for things. Like, we might use meditation as a pill, but it's not. I think that even though I talk a lot about spirituality, I'm a spiritual guide, and I talk a lot about these things that for some may be very um, woo woo.
Mm.
I like it to keep it real as well, because for me in my journey, my spiritual practice has led me into embracing more of my humanness. I want to be in my body. I want to enjoy this human experience. And I believe that this is what it should do. It's not about wanting to be somewhere else and to escape and be in the spiritual world. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. We are multidimensionals, but at the end of the day, we're still humans. We're still like, this experience is real for us. And so I believe that when you really marry the two, you have your spiritual practice, but you also embrace your human experience. That makes this experience, I would say, lighter. That makes this experience maybe more enjoyable, and maybe even, I would say, less difficult. Like I said, it's not that we're going to be immune to feeling the pain or to go through different difficult situations, but you just have a more expanded state of consciousness, so you can see things from a higher perspective, and so that you don't allow the experience to take over your being. You understand that it is an experience and you're in charge of it, like not your ego, but like your, I didn't like that,
Essence.
in charge of it, but you understand that there is something bigger, and so you don't need to yeah, the things that happen in your life, they don't need to take over your life. You don't need to be overwhelmed by them.
Right. And in any case, those who aren't, if someone who isn't into spirituality may, or if you recall, when before you were interested in spirituality, one might distract themselves with all these escapism in the form of, let's say, TV or what have you. And so it's not that spirituality is an escape. That kind of thinking is just more of the same thing that you get before or outside of spirituality. So yeah, like you said, it's actually coming to your true essence. And so inevitably being true to yourself more is going to be grounded and authentic, just as it's going to raise you up.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Carl Jung said that, I can't remember the exact phrasing, but he said the tree to heaven has its roots in hell, or something like that. And so that means that to get to the higher sites, we need to have our roots fundamentally in the ground and also into the deepest depths of the shadow, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's embracing it all, really,
Yeah,
and not living from a limited space. And so I can talk about it in different ways, but since I mentioned the Trinity, mind, body, and spirit, um, if you're just living from your mind and body, that's just going to be a limited experience, right? And so when you start to have a spiritual practice or you awaken, you start to be more in touch with your emotions. And for anybody who might be skeptical about it, um, sometimes it's just a matter of using a different terminology, because I can talk about emotions and not mention anything spiritual, because emotions, what is an emotion? Like, we don't actually see it, we feel it.
yeah,
Okay? And so we do have an emotional body, we do have an emotional system that many times we don't pay attention to, and we think of our health as in our physical health, right? We think of, I need to look after my body, I need to eat well, or I need to get those meds, right? It's more than that. When you accept your multi-dimensionality, that you are not just your body, you're not just your mind, you are also a spirit, you start looking after all of these areas, understanding that it's all one. The other way we can look at it too is the chakra system. If we're just looking at the lower chakras, which are not better or worse than the upper chakras, but they are more related to our human aspects. And we've been, as a collective, as a society, living very much only from the lower chakras, and imbalanced ones as well. So it's all about the human needs. It's all about, survival and the primal needs. And so that is very limited, right? Especially if they become imbalanced. And so that's why when you start getting in touch with your emotions, getting in touch with your shadow, with your darkness, with your traumas, you're accessing your heart and you're healing your heart, you're opening your heart. And so that's when you start expanding your experience. So it's not so limited anymore. And then from the heart, you can access those upper chakras and or those higher dimensions. And then life becomes more expanded. So it's not that you're just connected with your lower chakras, you're also connected with your spirit and your humanness through the heart.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier about leaving or creating space, and that's what love is. So is love fundamentally just about creating more space for an expanded expression of yourself and for others to expand their expression of self?
Yes. Yes. And I talk so much about the heart because I think it's really like, it's super important to heal and balance the heart and open the heart. Sometimes we might have the heart too open, like an overactive heart chakra. But it's, for me, it's all about finding ways to anchor yourself in your heart center. Because if you're anchored in your heart center, you have an open heart, you feel safe to feel those emotions as they come, right? You don't judge them. You go through an emotional turmoil, but you know deep down inside that it's a temporary phase and you're going to find your way back into your heart. When we're not connected with our hearts, when we're not anchored in our heart center, that's when life becomes overwhelming because you can't deal with your emotions. Either you're feeling too much and they take over you, or you're not feeling them enough and you're just repressing and causing all those, blockages in your energy system and shutting your heart essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think that understanding the chakras can be very helpful. But you said something very interesting to me about the Trinity, mind, body, and spirit. Now, obviously, in the law of one, it mentions mind, body, spirit complexes, but it sounds very Christian in a way, doesn't it? The Trinity.
I think so. I think it's kind of embedded in our consciousness because of I would say the last 2000 years. I don't see it. I can also give you another perspective on the Trinity. When we're thinking of the spiritual journey in relation to the expansion of consciousness as well and the dimensions of consciousness, we could see the mind as the 3D level of consciousness because it's very much to do with the ego. And you could also see that that pillar as the portal to your spiritual journey, because when you awaken, you realize, yourself realize, right? It's the self-actualization. And so the mind is not the bad guy. The mind can actually help you make sense of things, and it can help you realize things and self-actualize. And so when you move forward in that spiritual journey, and then you start healing, and that's very much to do with the body as well, because the body is a reflection of all your emotional and mental body and data that you stored over the years. And it's also related to the 4D level of consciousness, which is to do with the Akashic records, like you said, and the collective mind and feelings. And that's when you start opening your heart. That's when you start doing that healing journey. That's when you start looking within. That's when you start doing the shadow work or the inner child work. And this inevitably will get to that tip of the Trinity, which we can say it's the spirit, or I say it's the expansion of consciousness, because then you can look sort of from above that, okay, all is happening simultaneously, all is one, all is happening for me to get to this place. And that's the 5D level of consciousness, because then you're connected with your heart. And I like I said before, it is a continuous journey, because this can happen. This is going to happen again and again. But the more you go through these cycles, the more you know the way, right? The faster you're able to awaken, the faster you're able to heal, because you have been through this journey before.
It's like Mario Kart. Like the first time you do it, the track, you're like, okay, well, when we're going. But even as you, every time you go around, it's just you build up more experience. Yeah.
Yeah, a good analogy. And you know it, but it doesn't mean that you're not gonna, like, you will still feel tired at the end of it, but you know how to deal with it. Like, you know how to deal with your mind games during the marathon, you know how to deal with your physical, you're more prepared. So it's a good analogy. I love analogies too.
So do you think crystals are useful?
Yes, I do. I'm not an expert, but I do have a few. I actually have one in my hands right now, and I like connecting with them, because for me they are um, a solidification of cosmic energy. And so when I connect with them, I can feel that I'm connected with something bigger than this, even though they are physical matter. Yeah, when I'm connected with them, I know that I'm connected with something bigger than this third dimension.
I notice you've got a pyramid in the background there. That's a different shape of crystal. So what does the shape do?
Yeah, I have a little pyramid. Um, it's not a crystal, it's just, I know, ceramic. I don't know what it is, but I just love I love like learning about, the ancient Egyptians. And I feel like it's a way to connect with our ancient civilizations, and also with our higher dimensional friends.
Yeah, so about your our high dimensional friends, what sort of connections do you feel you have
What sort of connections do I have?
to higher dimensional friends?
Yeah, it's been a progress, from connecting with my dad years ago, and just really accepting and believing it, that there is an afterlife. And because he kept showing up in my dreams, and even like guiding me in certain moments in my life with words and just energy. Um, so I after a while, when I started, I think it was like in my 30s when I started um, meditating consistently. Like I said, I was writing songs every day, and I felt very connected with him more than before, and very connected with spirit guides in general. And so I went, okay, I know that my dad is my spirit guide, so I'm okay with it. And also I think he felt safe as well because I knew him, and he's part of my soul tribe, my soul group. And I actually think that your loved ones, in your family, or maybe close friends that have passed, they can be your spirit guides. And usually I always give them as the first example, because I feel like it feels familiar to us, so we feel safe to connect with them. But it sort of progressed a little bit because I started learning more about spirit guides and angels and higher dimensional beings. And so for a while, I remember that the voice that I was hearing, that I thought it was my dad, it sort of became just a collective. It wasn't just his energy. It was a different kind of energy. Um, and so when I started learning more about higher dimensional beings, I was very drawn to the Pleiadians, who are higher dimensional beings. They are the gatekeepers of the fifth dimension, and they come from the Pleiades star system. Um, I just felt like they were part of my team, and I believe they have been, but because I wasn't aware of them. And so that's why I think that knowledge also really expands our consciousness when we start learning more about things. Like I said, it's that connection. The knowledge helps you access more and more, because you might feel something, you might hear a voice, but you might not know where it comes from. And I also believe that it almost doesn't matter if you know where they're coming
Mm.
from. It matters what the message is and how it makes you feel. But for me, yes, the more I started learning about them, I actually did, this year, actually, I did a galactic origins chart with one of my guests in my podcast. It's kind of like zodiac chart, but for star beings, a star
That sounds
systems.
really interesting. So, what's the basics of how it works?
I wouldn't be able to tell you how it works, because she just she just asked me for my birth name and my birth date and the time I was born. So that's very similar to astrological charts, for example.
Yeah.
But that's specifically for knowing your coordinates according to, like, your star system chart, as in she will say your star seed mostly from the Pleiades or mostly from the Orion. And so you have different, like, percentages. And one of them in my chart was the Pleiadians. It was also the Sirius, and one planet that doesn't exist anymore. It's called Mintaka. And
Oh, I've heard of that. Yeah.
it's a water planet. And it is believed that the dolphins and whales came from there, as well as from the Sirius. But then that was really high in the percentage, and it made sense to me because I've always been obsessed with whales. I love them ever since
Do
I
you
was
like
a kid.
swimming? That seems like a silly question to ask in the context, but do you like
I
swimming?
love swimming. Yes, I love water. And then when I heard that, when I read my chart, I was just like, it was almost like remembering my home, and things just made a lot of sense. But interestingly, after that sort of awareness, after I read that, and I talked to her. And by the way, it's in my podcast as well, Dr. Heather. Um, after that, I had a really deep experience during a breathwork session where I actually heard a different voice, and they confirmed that the guides that I channel, they once gave me a name, the Guardians of Love. They said that they are part of that team. And then it just made so much sense to me because the Pleiadians are all about love, and they are the guardians of love in for this planet. Um, they were very loving, but very funny as well. You know, they have a very humorous and light, very compassionate energy. And so that was a really good confirmation, and it made me feel really connected with them. After that, there were other instances where I channeled the Orions, and so I feel like I'm sort of exploring different um, areas in the universe, and really opening up myself to channeling more of those beings.
Yeah, so the Orions are an interesting one because obviously the listener might have heard about the Orion Wars stuff, but I get the impression that that was a long time ago and things have changed a lot with their civilization.
Yeah, and you know, the message that I got from them was nothing negative. um I don't know how I feel about, you know, talking about like negative and positive. I know that there
That
have been, you know, wars and stuff, and people talk about, you know, negative entities. And like you mentioned, the law of one, they talk about negative polarized beings and positive polarized beings. For me, it was just like, I remember the message was just about Earth being an experiment, um, and that we are evolving and actually ascending from and healing. That was the message: healing from the cataclysm, healing from the trauma that is embedded in the collective. And I think that also I got that message because I've been doing a lot of work concerning the 5D consciousness, which has to do with ascending and healing through the heart. So, in a nutshell, that's what's happening with Mother Earth. Mother Earth is in the heart now, is in that 5D consciousness. Obviously, it may take thousands or maybe even millions of years, but that is a progression from those past wars or cataclysms.
do you think it's important to accept the history of humanity and let's say how we fell from grace, so to speak, rather than viewing it as all a big mistake that we need to recover from, and accept that as part of a larger process?
Yes, and I think that the way it works, it's very similar to the way it works in our individual lives. You know, because we are mini universes. We are the universe manifested into this physical human form. And so when we start looking at our own trauma and in our own life, and it can be just this lifetime, you know, we don't have to go back or go to parallel lives. If you're just doing that work, that is really powerful. And that is, I believe, how we heal the world. Because the way I see it is like, we are cells in the mother earth being. So I do believe that earth is having her own healing process and her own healing journey, and we are the cells. And obviously we are receiving signals from her because she is the main sort of like the mind of this being. um, and so it is available for us right now, because she is in the heart, and she's sending us those signals. And that's why I believe we are seeing a global awakening. We're talking more about these things. People are awakening to different levels, to different extents. Yeah, and so I think this is really the only way. Like you said, accepting it, that is just part of the process. I personally believe that the evolution of consciousness is the only way. And even if we go through cataclysms like we've gone through before, we will find our way back, because I think that the evolution of consciousness is the only way.
Yeah. And another thing is, I feel like I don't think she judges us for how we might have affected her. I feel like she loves us dearly. It's
Yeah,
nice for me to think about.
like a mother. Yeah, and
And maybe it might be safe to channel her as well, or to communicate with her.
yeah, I think that when we do that by really channeling the collective, and I really truly believe that when you work on yourself, on your inner healing, you are contributing to the healing of Mother Earth. And because that's really the like what the only way that we can change the world is changing our world, changing within. But I also believe that Mother Earth will always find her way back, and we've seen it before. And like when you think of the dinosaur era, you know, Mother Earth didn't try to recreate that when it ended. It recreated herself in a different way. And the same thing when we're talking about the fall of Atlantis, that cataclysm. Um, we didn't go back to the same place. We're obviously we're healing from those cataclysms, but we are also finding a new way. We're renewing ourselves. We're not just trying to go back to how it was before.
Yeah. I mean, and then on spiritual journey, if they go through, let's say, a dark night of the soul or a bit of a hard time, you don't be like, okay, how do I get to how I was? You're like, okay, what have I learned from this? What can I integrate? The healing process isn't merely a recovery. You're more than, I'm not sure if you're more than what you were, but you're less of what you're not.
Yeah. You're a new version. We're always rebirthing.
It's fascinating. Because we always think about, okay, we have our birth, we have our death, but it's a process, right? Is there anything else you'd like to share that, I don't know?
Well, we've talked about a lot of really nice things. I love that we went deep. I don't know. I think we've covered a lot of topics. I really do believe, though, that like one of the most, if not the most potent force in the universe is love. And that's why, I'm big on the heart. I'm big on self-love, because I think that's the only way that we're going to heal and we're going to ascend. Love is to do with 5D consciousness, is to do with the oneness and the unity consciousness. It is hard sometimes to see that unity consciousness when you see so much division in the world. But I keep the faith that, like I said, evolution is the only way. but we have to always go back to love, because love is really what connects us all and is the force that will keep pushing us into this evolution.
Yeah, and so I think about how the fact that it's so visible and so much is coming to the surface is in fact a sign that we really are coming together and coming back to love within our true essence, even if it doesn't look that way. So so yeah, there's actually everything is happening as it needs to. Yeah, it's easy to look at the world and be like, no, it's all wrong. We need to fix it. We need to save them, right? And that's not really it at all. So thank you for coming on. We've really talked about a range of things and really important things too. Um, although we've got to accept everything, right? Yeah. Um, thank you, and I enjoy music too. It's quite nice.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for having me, and yeah, for doing your podcast and opening up a platform for us to talk about these things. And I hope that the listeners will resonate with it.
I'm sure they will. Yeah. So yeah, feel free to check out his podcast on YouTube. And do you have any other platforms?
Yeah, I'm very active on Instagram and also an app called Insight Timer, where people can find meditations and channeled messages as well. The easiest way is to go to my website. You'll find all, the music, the links, the events. And so the website is willcaminada.com. Caminada is Caminada.
Right. So I hope you enjoyed. I certainly did.
Yeah.
And have a great day or great evening.
Thank you. You
And
too.
without further ado, bye for now.